What is up, everybody? This is Thomas Christopher of the League Winners. I'd like to introduce you guys to our newest show on the League Winners, College Football Now, where it's going to have me and multiple members of the League Winners who are on-site reporters talking to you about college football right now. We're going to go through every single conference from the FBS P4s to the G5s. We're going to have plenty of content out there. It's going to be a weekly show that is going to drop every Tuesday night. It's going to feature myself as the host, as well as numerous reporters who are on site reporting for these P4 and G5 football programs. Now, to enter tonight's show, it's our inaugural show, so we are going to do a preseason preview of this upcoming season. We're going to talk about the power index rankings for all the P4 conferences, all the G5 conferences. We're going to have some live guests coming in on the show. We're going to break down some numbers. We're going to talk quarterbacks. It's going to be a very fun time. First up is going to be Brandyn Haye, and we're going to talk some Power 4 football for you guys. But before we get to that point, I do want to mention how many quarterbacks have been named in the past week as starting quarterbacks. Now, some of these are obviously no surprises, while others a little bit more surprising. So in the past week, multiple quarterbacks have been named, and we're going to go through a list of a few of them right now, and let's see which ones jump off the page here. Of course, Notre Dame. We'll start with them. CJ Carr ended up beating out in the quarterback battle. That's kind of no surprise there. I know a lot of people were a little bit shocked, but hey, you can't always get what you want. And kind of piggybacking off of that is Steve Angeli, who is formerly a Notre Dame quarterback, played in the college football playoffs. He was named the starting quarterback in Syracuse over Ricky Collins. Ricky's a great player in his own right. It's just, it's one of those things where if you have an older guy, you have a guy who can run the offense, not as much time, gets him into the offense, still has experience. You want to give him a shot rather than kind of killing the self-esteem of a player who does have a little bit more time. And if he fails, they don't want to look like, hey, well, you can't go back to the young guy if Angeli fails after him. It's really a tough situation. Best of luck to Ricky, and hopefully he stays in Syracuse. Moving on, we have Jaron. I'm gonna have Cody. We'll have Cody Henderson, our reporter from Cal, pronounce his name because I do not want to botch that name at all. So he was actually named the starting quarterback. The former 5-star quarterback was named over Devin Brown, the former Ohio State quarterback, and obviously that surprised a lot of people. That one was probably the most surprising here. As we continue down the list, Joey Aguilar. As everybody knows, Tennessee traded Nico Iamaleava, basically traded Nico Iamaleava to UCLA, and Aguilar ended up leaving UCLA after transferring from Appalachian State, and now he is Tennessee's starting quarterback. They will face the aforementioned Syracuse Orange in Georgia, neutral site game, week one. Meanwhile, BYU has Bear Backmeyer as their starting quarterback who will enter week one. He is the first true freshman to start for BYU in the school's history at the quarterback position. That's a very interesting one. Let's go to Alabama Crimson Tide. We have Ty Simpson. Simpson was named, I believe he was one of the top 3 dual threat quarterbacks of the 2022 class, if I'm not mistaken. Not really a surprise there. If you're Alabama, you want to get back to Alabama football, and that's winning games. Simpson spent his time in the system, got to sit behind Milroe last year, and he's probably going to do well. Fresno State had named their starting quarterback. That's E.J. Warner. If that last name sounds familiar, it's because he's actually Kurt Warner's son. E.J. has not been handed anything his entire career, so seeing him get the starting nod here was pretty impressive. It's something you want to see from him, especially for a player that, he wants to be able to prove that he can take that next step. He doesn't have that much time left before he gets into the NFL draft, so he is a guy that you want to keep an eye on, as Fresno State does have an interesting schedule, and I believe that they will face Kansas. Now, Stanford has named Ben Gulbranson, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, as their starting quarterback. Ben is a little bit of a different story. I don't think too many people really know who Ben Gulbranson is. And to be honest with you, it's really hard to blame them. He started his career with Oregon State Beavers in 2020. He's made about 8 starts, I think, in 2022. He's played sparingly, but he actually got the nod over over the true freshman who started for Stanford who started games for Stanford last year. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out if he maintains that starting position throughout the course of the season. That's something to keep an eye on. And listen, guys, we're barely at the halfway point for these new quarterbacks being named in the past week. U Albany named Jack Shields. That's kind of a no-brainer. North Texas has named Drew Mestmaker their starting quarterback. That's not really too much of a surprise either. McNeese has named Jake Strong their starting quarterback. And while Georgia hasn't named Gunnar Stockton their starting quarterback, most of the beat writers in Georgia are assuming that he will take that starting nod. And that's, once again, a lot of these are chalk picks. San Diego State, Jaden Denagle, he'll be the starting quarterback. And this one was funny because I'm pretty sure this announcement was made because of a couple, let's just call it teenage beat reporters, kind of not really knowing the situation at hand. But Florida Atlantic has named Caden Veldkamp their starting quarterback. This is obviously a no-brainer. Zach Kitley, recruited Caden at Western Kentucky before Kitley went to Texas Tech. So it only made sense that Caden was going to A, come with him, which he did, and then B, become the starting quarterback in that sense. And along with Caden came Easton Messer, who was also at Western Kentucky. We'll talk about them a little bit later, but just keep an eye on that duo. I think they're really being slept on in terms of how successful they are going to be this year. And we'll keep going through these quarterbacks where we have Army has Dwayne Coleman, who is going to be taking over. Running that triple option offense in the American is going to be difficult, to say the least, especially now since teams are going to be a little more privy to it now that Rice is also running an option offense. So that's something to keep an eye on, how his success is, especially without Kanye Udoh, who has gone to Arizona State, the running back there. North Dakota State, new quarterbacks, Cole Payne, another chalk pick. Rice has Chase Jenkins, that we just talked about. Rice is running a triple option. He's going to be the first guy to run it at Rice. So that'll be interesting to see how his success will be. New Mexico has Jack Lane starting. Not much of a surprise there, considering they're missing their previous starting quarterback who left. If Lobos have a lot that they need to, improve on. So it'll be interesting to see if Jack can do it. Louisiana named Walker Howard their starting quarterback. Also not a surprise. UMass has named Brandon Rose theirs. And Memphis, Brendan Lewis. People may not be familiar with Brendan Lewis. That's okay. He should be a suitable starting quarterback for them to replace Dorian Mensah. Now, the final one that we've kind of seen on here that hasn't been talked about yet is Missouri with Sam Horn and Penn State transfer boy Bo Prebula. It's kind of a neck and neck battle right now. There's still nothing to be said about that. So we'll just keep an eye on that one going forward. And man, if that's not enough interesting stuff in the week, that doesn't even touch the other position battles that are going on throughout the nation. And it's just going to be very interesting to see as we start heading into this P4 discussion, who is going to take over, who's going to make the college football playoffs, and who is going to really assert themselves this season. There's a lot of great teams on the docket. There's a lot of great schedules to be made. If you're just looking through the list, going from week 0 to all the way to week 14, it's just going to be amazing and incredible football. And personally, I cannot wait to see it at all. But actually, we have him right now, so we're going to bring in Brandyn Haye to the stage. Brandyn, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. So, as everyone's known, as I said at the beginning of the show, we're going to be bringing in some of our experts, some of our reporters, some of our on-site people to this show to give you some of their updates. And for those of us who can't make it to the show, we do have live written updates about what they are expecting from their teams this season. Brandyn's joining me to talk some P4 football. And honestly, we're going to start with the SEC. So, Brandyn, I'm going to put in the power index rankings for the SEC so we can kind of take a look, dissect some stuff that's happening there, and give our thoughts on some of the teams. Now, first, kind of a no-brainer. We have Texas Longhorns in first, followed by the Georgia Bulldogs, and the Alabama Crimson Tide is your top 3. And then rounding out the top 5 is the Tennessee Volunteers and Texas A&M. Now, after that, we have Ole Miss, South Carolina, LSU Tigers, Florida Gators, and the Sooners are the top 10. And then just outside the top 10, we have the Auburn Tigers, Missouri Tigers, the Arkansas Razorbacks, Kentucky Wildcats, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Brandyn, how do you feel about this power index right now? Do you agree that Texas should be number one? Is there any surprises to you on this list?
My surprise is that Tennessee is number 4. I think, with the whole quarterback situation, I think they're a little too high, and I don't think South Carolina is high enough.
How high are you on Lenore Sellers, the South Carolina quarterback going into this year?
I'm pretty high on him. One of the things is, he has that dual threat ability, and he kind of struggled at the beginning of last year, but really came on at the end. So I think that he can. Their defense is always good, and I think he could be one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league. And all those other teams, they're starting with new quarterbacks. We think Arch Manning's going to be great, but how good is he going to be? Has that early test with Ohio State. Georgia, we're not totally sure. Alabama, they should be able to throw the ball better. But we don't really know how those quarterbacks in the starting roles will really do.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that quarterback battle because Julian Sain just got named the starting quarterback for Ohio State. So that'll be interesting to see how that develops. And of course, Arch Manning is going to get Jack Endries, former California Golden Bear. I think he's kind of being very much slept on. I think he's going to end up being a star in not just college football, but somebody that's going to be taken pretty high in the NFL draft. Now, the Florida Gators are kind of almost seeing themselves on the outside looking in on that top 10. They're sitting at 9th place there. How do you feel about Florida going into this year?
Well, one of the things is the health of DJ Lagway. He's been dealing with some injuries, so he has to stay healthy, and their schedule is just brutal. So it depends on, how they can get through that schedule for the second half of the year.
Yeah. And, I want to talk about Tennessee for a second because they have Joey Aguilar there, who's now the starting quarterback. What's interesting to me is that Joey was at UCLA before Nico came. And then when Nico came, he left. So do you think that he was told that Nico was going to just automatically get that starting job? Or do you think that he just didn't want to compete for that starting job?
I think Tennessee might have given him more money, possibly, because I know Tennessee was kind of looking around, when Nico left, to a couple of different quarterbacks. Yeah. I did hear that Hoover from TCU is someone they reached out to. So I think they were reaching out to some different quarterbacks. But he probably it's probably a little bit of all of what you just said, the possibility of more NIL at Tennessee, the ability to be the starter. And I think Tennessee's offense is with Heupel is set up for more success. I just don't know, how good that offense will really be.
Yeah, because Aguilar was good with Appalachian State, before the transfer to UCLA, then to Tennessee. In 23, he had almost 4,000 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, but he did have 10 interceptions. And then last year, he kind of, less games, still pretty good numbers. He had about 3,000 yards even. 55% completion percentage, 55.9 completion percentage, that's a little ghastly. But yeah, and then he had 23 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. Do you think he playing in the SEC where the competition is a lot higher, than the competitors for Appalachian State, do you think he will be able to keep those turnover numbers down?
That's going to be tough. Because I think that's one of the biggest things with Tennessee when they had Hendon Hooker, and they were so explosive. They didn't have the turnovers. I do think Tennessee's scheme kind of, with the spread kind of allows for, quick reads and, not necessarily having to read, intricate, different plays and everything. So I think that the scheme will help. But I just think that's for all that so unknown for Tennessee. I just think that's too high of them ranked with all those good teams in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk to you about the bottom five here, if there's any surprises there. Mississippi State is dead last. Vanderbilt is second to last. Kentucky third to last. Arkansas and then Missouri. Do you think those teams are going to be bottom of the barrel in the SEC this season?
I think Vanderbilt's interesting because of how well they played last year. But like a lot of people said, they're not going to sneak up on anyone this year. I haven't necessarily looked at Vanderbilt's schedule, but I would put them closer to the middle of the SEC than the bottom like they are now.
Yeah, and another interesting team for me on there is actually the Oklahoma Sooners, which come in 10th. Jim Nagy's the new, I guess we'll call him general manager there of the University of Oklahoma. Given the way he's done with the Senior Bowl, do you think that was a smart move by Oklahoma, or do you think they were more so looking for a name, not just to, I guess, build the program, but more to monetize the program?
I think that's a big part of it, but I think it was a smart move as well. Just because the last couple of years Oklahoma's kind of fell off from where they were, when they were in the Big 12, and I think getting some of those players, they've had a little trouble retention of some of the higher end players they get. So, and Nagy has all those connections, so I'm sure that was big for Oklahoma.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get your opinion on here before we start heading towards the next the conference that we will discuss. So looking at this list, who is going to finish first? Who is going to finish last?
I think they have it right with Mississippi State. They're still in transition and everything. Uh, First is tough because I think Georgia might have more, or at least the same amount of talent as Texas. But if Arch is even close to what they're saying he can be, um, I think Texas would have that. And Alabama, obviously they don't have Nick Saban anymore. So
Right.
I think people are less, high on them, but I think they have a lot of talent, especially at receiver. And if they can get good quarterback play, especially passing the ball, then I think it's those three teams at the top. But I guess, with the quarterback position, I would give Texas the slight edge.
Now, I actually tend to agree with you. I just wanted your opinion. Ty Simpson finally is named the starting quarterback at Alabama. He's kind of waited to pay his dues. What are your thoughts on him?
I think it fits more what they're trying to do. I was actually pretty surprised when they stuck with Jalen Milrow because he did not fit that offense at all, and he was very inconsistent. So Simpson might not have the highs that Milrow did, but I think week in and week out it's going to be more consistent, and the receivers are going to go get the ball more in timing and everything. So I think that offense will be more explosive.
I completely agree. I'm interested to see how that is. Little fantasy tidbit aside, I've drafted Ty Simpson in a Devy league of mine a couple years back. Finally reaping those benefits this year. Let's just hope he performs well. I'm rooting for him. So we're gonna head in the next conference now, and this is one is going to be we'll call it Brandon's specialty because it's going to be the Big 12 conference. So let's start from top to bottom on here. These are the Power Index rankings for the Big 12 preseason Power Index rankings. First, we have the Kansas State Wildcats at number 1, BYU Cougars number 2, Arizona State Sun Devils rounding out the top 3, and then Kansas Jayhawks, Baylor Bears at 5, 4, and 5 respectively. Rounding out the top 10, we have the Iowa State Cyclones, the Texas Tech Red Raiders, TCU Horned Frogs, your UCF Knights, sorry, and the Utah Utes are 10th, and then the final 6 that we have here are the Colorado Buffaloes, Cincinnati Bearcats, West Virginia Mountaineers, Oklahoma State Cowboys, Arizona Wildcats, and the Houston Cougars. Now, Brandon, I want your opinion. Is there any teams on here that surprise you in this listing from 1 to 16?
I would say I would surprise Iowa State is so far down at 6 because they returned their quarterback. I know they lost a couple receivers, and then I know Colorado lost a lot, but they bring in Salter from Liberty, and they have tons of weapons on the outside and good running backs. I mean, they're probably going to have to do the same where they outscore people, but
Right.
I think they should be higher than, at this point, Utah and even UCF.
Yeah, that's interesting. How do you feel about UCF? Because they are sitting there at number 9, I believe it is. Do you think they're like right middle of the pack now that they have Scott Frost back?
Yeah, I think so. I think we actually talked about this earlier today. The quarterback competition is still going with the 3 quarterbacks. I think the biggest thing is early on, them getting their footing, running the ball, playing good defense, and just trying to capitalize on their, tight ends, Dylan Wade and Jaden Fox. I think those they have skilled at wide receivers, a couple of freshmen, Wayne Charles and Carl Jenkins Jr. But that takes some time. So I think they will try to use the matchups with the tight ends and everything. And the quarterbacks are going to be mobile, so that's going to be good. But really, it comes down to being able to pass the ball because under Gus Malzahn, they just struggled to pass the ball consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody listening or viewing right now, Brandon was there for their big spring contest that they had, and he's been keeping an eye on the team as we enter fall camp or as we near the end of fall camp and start entering the regular season. I do want to not a little quick break, I guess, but a quick incoming intel from our own Kyle Jones from Kansas, who has the Jayhawks finishing this season at a 9-3 record. Obviously, Jalen Daniels, he expects a big season out of him, and Daniel Highshaw, the running back. Do you think they can finish 9-3 this year? Do you think that's possible? Do you think because we saw them stumble last year, right? Do you think that they're able to pick themselves back up, considering it's the last year for a lot of these guys? And it's Leopold's fourth, I believe it's his 4th year now. So a lot of guys are going through that entire scheme and concepts with him. Do you think they're able to hit that 9-win mark?
I think it's a possibility. I think it also depends on Daniels just staying healthy. I know that there's been some, nagging injuries that he's had, but when he has been in and that offense is really clicking, they're a hard team to beat. So I don't, I think Kansas State is, the front runner. I really like Avery Johnson at quarterback. But I think there's a lot of room to kind of see. There's Arizona State. Um, losing Scatabo and kind of seeing what they are. BYU, I believe their quarterback transferred because he was going to be suspended.
Yeah, they just named, I believe it's Bear Backmeyer as he's a true freshman, first true freshman to start for the program and program history.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of open competition in this conference, and I think Kansas could be able to get that 9-win mark.
Yeah, I tend to agree. BYU is an interesting one because, as we just said, they are starting a true freshman. Starting a true freshman in a P4 conference doesn't always necessarily go well, especially one that's not, and I guess we'll call it elite of elite. I don't want to take anything away from Backmeyer. He could be great for all we know. But kind of throwing him to the wolves, it's hard for me to put BYU at number 2 there. Arizona State, they ended up getting, I talked about this at the beginning portion of the show. They did get Kanye Udo, the Army running back, who he's going to be replacing Scatabo. Udo is amazing, fantastic. Saw him live a couple times, and I hope I can see him again this year at some point. Great runner, really hard-nosed kid. Kind of like where Kansas is at at 4. I would assume that probably gets them about 9 wins. I would have to assume there. UCF, this might hurt you a bit, but I'm not. If they start Cam Fancher, great kid. I don't know if they end up being bowl eligible. I think they might be on the outside. It really depends what Scott Frost and the rest of that company does to have that offense go through him. And now in the Arizona Wildcats, like they're kind of, I would put them there. I mean, Oklahoma State's interesting because prior to last year, I think didn't they finish second in the Big 12 in 23, or like top 3 in the division there?
I'm not totally sure. I know they had a really down year, which surprised me. Another team that I think is kind of a sleeper, they've been really talked about because they've really ramped up the NIL and everything, is Texas Tech. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of people have been talking about them to see, what they can really do. That offense, they've got some running backs coming in because Taj Brooks, who had huge numbers there, actually plays for the Bengals now. He actually didn't look too bad the other night. And I think, like I said, that I think the Big 12 is kind of wide open, and because I think Kansas State is the best team right now, but not by a large margin. And we've seen they've stumbled in the past against teams they shouldn't have.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, taking a look at this list, is there anybody, who finishes first for you and who will finish last?
I think Kansas State will end up finishing first, and I think Arizona will finish last. I think Houston will do a little better than them, maybe getting up to maybe like 12th or something like that. But I think Arizona will be the worst.
Yeah, I feel bad because I don't want to agree for the sake of the show, but I think I have to. Kansas State, I really like Avery Johnson at quarterback there, and Arizona, they lost Tet. They don't have great weapons. They're kind of in a weird flux right now. And I just don't see them performing well. One team that I am very interested in seeing though going forward is the Colorado Buffaloes. I mean, before we get to this next conference, I just want to get your thought. Were you surprised that Dion ended up staying, after his sons left?
Um, a little, but he's been getting some really high recruits. Um, and I didn't think there's necessarily a job that he would jump to go to. If there was a job, possibly. I don't know how he feels about Florida State because I know there's some tension because he didn't. I don't think necessarily got a look or anything, but in the search before, not that he should have, but Dion might kind of hold a grudge a little bit there. Uh, so I don't know if there's a really um, school, that I go to. And I mean, Colorado's had more success than they have had in the recent past, but they haven't really come close to, any Big 12 championships or anything. So I'm sure he wants to leave his mark there.
Yeah, it'll be incredibly interesting to see how Dion navigates the rest of that, without his son and going through all that. Because I do think he can be a good leader of men. And it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. So actually, that gives us a good segue because he just ended up joining the show. We're going to go to the ACC, and with that, we are going to bring in our Cal Bears and West Coast correspondent, Cody Henderson. Cody, how you doing, brother?
What's going on, guys? Doing good. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Now let's bring this up. We're gonna go bring out the power index for the ACC, and we're going to get your guys' quick opinions on that. Let's just go full screen on that sucker there. First, we have the Clemson Tigers, Miami Hurricanes at 2, SMU Mustangs at 3, Virginia Tech at 4, Louisville at 5. And then rounding out the top 10 is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, the Duke Blue Devils, the Boston College Eagles, the Pittsburgh Panthers, and the NC State Wolfpack. And then rounding out the last 7, which is actually, this is an interesting bottom list, is the Tar Heels, the Syracuse Orange, Florida State Seminoles, Stanford Cardinal, Virginia Cavaliers, Cody's Cal Golden Bears, and the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Fellas, what are your thoughts on that ranking right there? Let's put it back up for everybody to see. I'll start with Cody. Cody, any surprises for you on this list here?
Yeah, and I'm gonna be biased here, and I think Cal is obviously ranked a little bit too low for this. But I'm gonna go to your team, Tommy. I think Syracuse is a little too low on this as well. I know. I think they went 9-3 last year. Yeah, they lost Kyle McCord, but I do think that they've got Fran Brown has got something cooking up there up north in northern New York. I just have a hard time seeing Syracuse fall off that much. I think they're gonna be near the top of the conference, so we'll see. I I think they definitely got disrespected on this list.
Yeah, and Brandon, I'm going to bring it to you now. What are your thoughts on his?
I think Virginia Tech is too high. I know they brought in, some transfers, Tyrion Stewart, running back, but I think kind of saw last year Kyron Drones is just so inconsistent, and I think Georgia Tech should be more in that top 4 range, because they really showed some great things last year, and also I'm surprised Stanford isn't lower. I know they're the bottom third, but I don't think they're going to be very good. So I would definitely put Cal over Stanford there.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of agree with you guys. I think Cal should be a little higher. Despite the losses on offense, I know that the media might be lower on them, but I do think they'll be better than Stanford this year. Syracuse, I'm interested to see how they perform. I do think that Virginia Tech is a little high on there. I also think Miami is a little high, but I'll leave that discussion for a bit. But for now, I do want to talk to Cody. And Cody, we want to get your thoughts, hear your predictions on the Cal offense this year. What do you think their schedule is going to be? And just name a couple key guys that fans should be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you guys noticed or if you hadn't noticed, Jaren Kiave Songopulutele has been named the starting quarterback. That was a big shocker to me, and I know that was a big shocker to a lot of the guys in the media. We all kind of expected Devin Brown to kind of, start and, have a short leash, I guess you could say. But no, Cal's going to roll with it. Justin Wilcox announced that yesterday. So that's very, very interesting. Couple of guys on the outside I think you got to look for is Keon Grays. He is another Ohio State transfer. He didn't really play too much last year because he was battling injuries, but he's going to be a formidable, receiver on the outside. Yeah, I think this offense, you mentioned it earlier, Tommy, they lost a lot of these big name guys, but at the same time, I mean, they went hard in the portal and they brought in a lot of guys too. Karan Adams, he averaged 30 yards a catch last season. Now he didn't have that many receptions, but that's another speedster. And then I got to see this player firsthand last year at the bowl game, Cal and UNLV, with Jacob DeJesus when he played for UNLV. Now he transfers to Cal and he's just like that ultimate weapon. He's not very tall, but he's just that kind of guy you got to get the ball to. I mean, he's so fast. He'll be in the slot. Wouldn't be surprised if they hand the ball off to him a little bit this year. And something that I find interesting, and I think you guys will find this interesting too, is Kedu Luwale might be getting the ball a little bit.
Really?
Yeah. So that's kind of, they've been kind of flirting with that idea. I don't know if it's a certain package. I don't know if they're just teasing us, but they posted a picture of him today running with the football. He's kind of hinted at it. The coaching staff has kind of hinted at it. I mean, he's a freak athlete, so I don't really know how that's going to go, but that's something to look forward to watching if Cade can maybe do that Travis Hunter dual position, type player. But no, I was looking at the schedule again today. I made my predictions a couple of days ago, and then Jaren was named the starting quarterback, so I wanted to take a look back at it. So they open up on the road as underdogs, actually, against Oregon State, a team they beat by like almost 40 points last year. I don't agree with that. I think they're going to go in there and probably win by 2 touchdowns, to be honest with you guys. Yeah. Oregon State, it is a tough place to play in Corvallis. So I know Vegas is probably a little worried just of all the big names that have left. But, I mean, Cal's got the better athletes. They've got the better line. I just don't see how they lose that game. So I've got that as a W. Cal starting off 1-0, and then they play at home. Home opener against Texas Southern. I think that's a very obvious W, 2-0. But then they get to that third week where they play Minnesota. And PJ Fleck versus Justin Wilcox kind of feels like I can't think of the term, but 2 opposing forces, and they're just monsters in 1-score games, and they're defensive guys. I've got Cal losing that game. That's going to be a tight game. I hope they win that game because that's a Big Ten, playing a Big Ten team. Right. But I've got them 2-1 through 3 games in the season, and they go on the road to San Diego State. I think they get that win. So that would be 3-1. Then I think they go to Boston College. I think they win that one as well. I think they'll be 4-1 at that point. And then they got Duke at home, which I have them losing. So 4-2 Duke's just got a lot of firepower. It kind of feels like a weird game. I don't know. But then I think they surprised a lot of people. This is going to be on August 17th. I think that's a Thursday or Friday, probably a Friday against UNC. Bill Belichick coming to town. I think Cal's going to win that game. I think they're going to stand up for that game. And I think they're going to go 5-2. Then they go on the road to Virginia Tech, and I've got them losing that game. Virginia Tech's a good team. Maybe not as good as what the predictions are saying, but that's a long flight for Cal. Metallica
Blacksburg too, yeah.
Blacksburg. I mean, that might be too much for them to overcome. But this is the Cal team that went in Auburn last year and won on the road there too. So it's hard to tell. But Virginia Tech is a tough place to play. Blacksburg is a monster. So I think they're 5-3 right there through 8. And then Virginia at home, I think they win that game, go to 6-3. Louisville on the road, I think they lose there, 6-4. I think they beat Stanford in Stanford 7-5 or 7-4. Then I think they lose the last game of the year to SMU. So I've got Cal going 7-5, getting a bowl game, and I think that would be great for them, especially with a true freshman starting quarterback. Last time Cal did that was Jared Goff, and the team wasn't very good, but the defense was also horrible, which I don't think the defense is going to be horrible at all this year. I think they're going to be probably just as good as last year, maybe a setback, but some of the transfers they brought in, Paco Austin and Hezekiah Masses and a couple of other guys, Harrison Taggart at linebacker to play along next to Cade. They've got some studs on defense, so I don't know. I think Cal go 7-5, and that would be very, very good for them, considering they started a true freshman. And then that'll hopefully, bring some juice to the program going forward too. So that's my season prediction.
I think fans are going to be pleasantly surprised with that for sure. That'd be considering the way last year went with so many tough, close, one score losses, having them bounce back in a way with a true freshman quarterback starting and getting to a bowl game would be nice for them. Before we let you go, Cody, what are your thoughts on Jaron starting the starting quarterback? Just give me your overall thoughts on him.
I'm excited as I can be. I mean, I felt like with Devin Brown, your floor is a little bit higher than with Jaron, but also Devin Brown, I mean, no offense to him, and I think he's a great guy, but he doesn't really bring the juice to the program that Jaron brings. And that's not Devin Brown's fault. I mean, I'm sure he's a great player. He was a 5-star quarterback at one time. He's a former champion. But Jaron just brings that juice to the program. He's got a lot of zip on the ball. He's got great size. And he's, working with some coaches that have worked with a lot of guys that have gone on to the NFL. So I'm excited as can be. I know Cal fans are very, very excited. I know they all wanted him to start. I think all of us deep down thought Devin Brown would start, though, just because of how old he is and where he came from. But, man, I mean, if he can develop, if he develops and he turns into an all-world quarterback like Jared Goff was and they can put a team around him, by 2027, 2026, Cal could be really knocking on the door here in the next couple of years if Jaron can develop and, play well, because he'll just elevate the program. Transfers will come and want to play with him. So it could be huge. This is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen a former Hawaiian legend give him a shout out at the Mountain West that you were there for. Yes. Now, before you go, Cody, let everybody know where they can find you at.
Yeah, so you guys can find me on X at Cody TLW. It's all lowercase. I'm usually on there posting my thoughts about Cal, little Raiders stuff too, if you're interested in the NFL. Then I'm on a podcast every week called The Bear Avengers every Thursday, where we promote the league winners as well every week. So you'll catch me around X for the most part. And Instagram too. I don't know my Instagram handle off the top of my head though. But
it's all right. Cody, thanks for coming on, man. We'll see you next week. You take care, brother.
Yeah, of course, guys. Good to see you.
Yep, later. And that was Cody. Appreciate Cody coming on and giving us those thoughts. Nobody else is going to know Cal football like Cody. Obviously other than some beat writers there, but Cody is one of the best of the new breed. Now let's take another peek quickly at this ACC Power Index rankings. Brandyn, I wanted to get your thoughts here on the Miami Hurricanes, who are listed at number 2. What do you think? Do you think that Carson Beck can realistically make them, a better team than SMU based on what ESPN has here?
I think he can. I think people kind of forget 2 2 years ago, he looked really good at Georgia. I think last year, very up and down. But the ACC isn't the SEC. I mean, talent-wise, and I think Miami has some good talent around him. I think they could be better than SMU. I just think overall they probably have more talent. That's why they have him ahead right there of SMU. So I kind of see that. I still think there's a big gap between Clemson and everyone else. So as long as Clemson doesn't, lose 2 or 3 games, I think they should be able to win that conference.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I got it between Clemson and SMU personally. I am a little bit lower on Carson Beck than I know a lot of people are. Just because, playing in the SEC, I understand he played in the SEC. But at the same time, he hasn't. To me, he hasn't been able to take that leap into like a superstar quarterback. He's more of a guy who's plays within the realm of the rest of his parts. It's like very Mark Sanchez-esque to me, where he was, Mark Sanchez with the Jets, didn't have to do too much, had a great run game, had guys on the outside that he could get the ball to when he wanted, and then obviously a great defense. And I think that Beck kind of was given that same kind of model at Georgia. I know it was a little different because Bowers is tight end, and Sanchez did not have a tight end like that, but I think it's the kind of the same mold. I'm not necessarily sold on him. Do you think he's better than what Cam Ward brought to the team last year?
Well, I would say yes if I didn't see what Cam Ward just did last year. Because I think, obviously Cam Ward went first in the NFL draft. I know a down year for quarterbacks, but no one saw that coming.
Right.
And Cam Ward really improved on a lot of things they struggled with, especially turnovers before Miami. And what you're saying about kind of, in short terms, you're kind of saying that at Georgia he's kind of a game manager. But I think Georgia wants their quarterbacks to be that.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And not whereas Miami is not going to have the defense Georgia did. I mean, hopefully for their sake, it's better than last year because if they had a even decent defense last year, they probably would have been in the playoffs with what Cam Ward was doing. But because they don't, I think that Carson Beck might be able to let it loose a little bit more. I know he made some mistakes last year, but maybe with that, having a little bit more free reign and not being worried about all that, being a little bit more of a gunslinger, which I think he is, might allow for him to grow a little bit. This year it also depends on, if he's fully healthy.
Yeah, I you know what, I'm not going to hate on that. I think you definitely have a point, especially when it comes to, Georgia trying to they want their guys to be able to manage the game and not lose them the game. That makes a lot of sense to me. Before we go forward, I do want to mention we did have another one of our other correspondents. This is time for the Pitt Panthers, our own Jacob Murray. He gives his inside information. He is not able to make it on the show, but he did send us written estimate of what the season is going to look like and players to watch out for. Now, Jacob has the team finishing 10-2 with their losses coming at Florida State in week 7 in the home and at home against Notre Dame in week 12. He does have key wins, including West Virginia on September 13th, home against Louisville on September 27th, and he has them beating Miami that we just talked about on November 28th. He thinks that Florida State may be the hardest road opponent for the Panthers this year, and he sees West Virginia taking a step back in Rich Rodriguez's first year back with the program. Now, he has 2 key players he wants to keep an eye on for Pitt this season, and they would be preseason All-Americans. One is a linebacker, part of the Sharks group that they call him, that is Kyle Lewis, amazing linebacker, and the other is running back / return man Desmond Reed, who came from the FCS, believe it or not, and really broke onto the scene last year. Both players were key contributors for Pitt last season and poised to have huge seasons this year. And he says, with that said, he believes Pitt has the ability to make the ACC title game. That is spicy. I want to get your thoughts on that in a second. He thinks these are high expectations, but with year 2 of Eli Holstein at quarterback, he believes this team is poised to elevate from last year. This is the same team that started 7-0 in 2024 before collapsing after a few key injuries hurt them badly. Now, Brandyn, I want to hear your thoughts there. Jacob says that they can make an ACC title game. Do you think that's in the realm of possibilities for Pitt?
I think it's in the realm of possibilities. I'm not as high on Pitt. It kind of depends on the development of Holstein. He had a good first year starting, nothing great, but he showed some nice things.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Narduzzi. I think it's so interesting. In the NFL, usually the defensive coaches have bad defenses when they're the head coach, and he has a bad defense, and he was such a good defensive coordinator at Michigan State. It's so interesting about that. And sometimes in the game, I'm not going to lie and say I've watched every Pitt game, but in the games I have watched with Pitt, I think sometimes at the end of the games, the decisions he makes aren't the best. So there's other coaches within that league that I would just trust more.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a lot of the criticism, I guess, towards Pitt is Narduzzi. I know people aren't necessarily happy with him because that team, like Jacob alluded to, they did start 7-0, then they went on to lose their final 6, including a heartbreaking bowl game loss. Something interesting in that is that Eli Holstein. So I was there for the shellacking of Syracuse at Pitt, where Kyle McCord, love Kyle McCord, but that was probably his worst game of his career. I think it was either 5 or 6 interceptions, and he had 3 pick sixes, if I'm not mistaken. But what's lost in that game is that Eli Holstein actually was concussed at the end of the game in the blowout. And they didn't report that. I hope I'm not getting anybody in trouble saying that. He was definitely concussed, though, based on what I was able to see. And then the team just took a nosedive after that. So I am a little bit higher on Holstein than some people, but I think Narduzzi's kind of that great equalizer where the team can be amazing, but if the head coach isn't at that level, you'll have a mediocre team. It's something that we saw. I mean, I don't want to say the Jets of last year because on paper the Jets of last year had a good team. We'll use Jets as an example: Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, good offense, Breece Hall running back. Then you have Robert Saleh, who wasn't really able to manage the team, even as a defensive guy, and all those mistakes. So I think you kind of see similarities to that extent with Narduzzi. The ACC is such. I know it's not the SEC, but it's such a crazy conference to think about because there's so many good teams there. And one of them is a new coming team with a new incoming head coach, but he's an NFL legend, and that's Bill Belichick. Now, Bill has his team. Let's take a look at this list one more time here, and they are near the bottom of the pack there. I'm pretty sure they are at they're at 11. So a little bit, second half outside the top 10. Do you think that's a good first year for Bill Belichick and company? Do you think that 11th in the ACC is A, enough to get a bowl game, and B, just good enough?
I think it might be good enough to get a bowl game. I mean, by his standards, I wouldn't think so. I've heard some rumors and everything that everyone in the ACC respects Bill Belichick, as a coach, but just wonders if he's going to be able to work with all these college kids and everything. So I would think if you're Bill Belichick in North Carolina, you would want to finish, I would say, in top 8 in the conference would be a goal that you would want to meet. In kind of to build that recruiting and everything, because if he goes near the bottom, I mean, kids, I don't know if his Super Bowls will hold on to all those kids that are coming up, because a lot of the Super Bowls happen,
You're gonna say before they were born.
Not before they were born, but it's not going to be in the front of their mind. The last year's the Patriots is going to be more in the front of their mind, and how the Matt Jones experiment didn't really work, and how most people said it was Brady and not Belichick, which I don't totally agree with, but it's kind of hard not to see that Brady was a big part of his success.
Yeah, especially after his time in Tampa and he won a ring with the Buccaneers. I think it's interesting because I think what I've got from talking to Bill at the ACC kickoff is that I think he's going to try to really slow down and make it a more pro style offense than what UNC is used to, right? Because UNC was a lot of fast actions, just fast, just coming at you fast. And I think that Belichick's going to kind of change that going into this season. I think he's going to I think he might even utilize a fullback, which is kind of insane just for some, just to think about. But I really think he's going to, just because I know this is going to sound cliche given I asked him the question, but following up with him a little bit on that in the breakaway rooms, and he was kind of alluding to that too. And it seems weird to say, but Bill Belichick is like nice as the UNC head coach. Like, would you ever think that he would be like thanking reporters and saying, please, like, just for questions? Like, do you think that's Bill Belichick? Does that make sense to you?
No, but things I've heard from Patriot players is that he's actually funny and fun to talk to and everything, which it's hard to see him on the sidelines, but I think that's a good sign that he knows he can't be the way he was with the Patriots. And talking about the fullback and everything, I mean, with all these teams that go to a spread, going back to when Jim Harbaugh went to Michigan because they were trying to run the spread, then he came in with the traditional I formation and everything, and it worked pretty well. So that might be something that if he knows he doesn't have the athletes to run that kind of spread, then to kind of take a time off the clock. And North Carolina has not had good defenses, especially near the end with Matt Brown. So if he can get a better defense, which he's usually had, then the offense might not need to be as explosive and can kind of play that ball control like he's trying to do.
Yeah, so when talking to him, his defense is going to be very tough. And I took that as it's going to be a lot more bigger guys than quicker guys, if that makes sense. I'm sure he'll have a lot of physical guys in the secondary. Obviously, these guys won't be slow. They're going to be P4 athletes. Everybody's fast at the P4 level. But I think the defense and the offense are going to be more power oriented. But one kid I am actually keeping an eye on is their wide receiver, Jordan Shipp. I think he's going to be a stud in that offense. So I'm very excited to see how that goes. And I guess now I can kind of talk about my Syracuse Orange. It's time for my break, I guess. And I have the Orange going 7-5 despite the hardest schedule in the college football regular season, at least based on preseason rankings. That would be Syracuse at number 1 with the hardest, and I have them going 7-5, making a bowl game. A little bit of a downgrade from Fran Brown's first year because when they went 9-3, but you kind of expect that with how difficult a season that they have. I don't think people understand that they're facing 5 ranked teams this season, at least from preseason standards, and plus they have a murderer's row at the ACC level in their conference games. Their only easy game comes in week 3 against Colgate. That's an old historic rivalry, but Colgate has not beaten Syracuse since 1950, so I don't think that's going to be too much of a concern for them. But with that said, talking about key players, I mean, obviously Steve Angeli, the new starting quarterback, he's going to be a guy that you want to watch out for. I'm sure he's going to have a chip on his shoulder, especially when they go in the South Bend and play that game against Notre Dame. That's going to be very interesting. And I'm curious to see if he holds on to that job because it is a tough schedule. And then, other players I really want to keep an eye on too is Justin Willis, the running back, 6'1", I think he's 220 plus right now. Big kid. He looks great. Jonte Cook, the former 5-star Texas Longhorns wide receiver. He looks amazing. Made a one-handed catch yesterday that just looked so effortless, and that's something only 5 stars can do. And then, of course, on the defensive side of the ball, I do have to shout out true freshman Demetrius Samuel Jr. He's only 17 years old. He's going to be the starting cornerback for the Syracuse Orange, and head coach Fran Brown said that he will also be playing wide receiver. So I have them at 7-5. Do you think that 7-5 is fair for Syracuse, even knowing that their schedule is going to be difficult?
Yeah, I do. I think because I looked at the line for their wins, and I was like, oh, I'll go way over on that because it was either 5.5 and 6.5. And I saw the schedule, and yeah, I think 7 is probably one of the higher ends. I think we talked about this. If they can get that win against Tennessee right out of the gates, maybe they can get 8 or 9 wins. Really raise that confidence. but quarterback play is going to be a big thing for them. I do hope Jonte Cook does great things. You were talking about Devy. I was all over Jonte Cook in every Devy draft I could get. I thought he was going to be amazing. He still can. So I'm hoping they can showcase that thing.
Yeah, I would love to see it. I would love to see it. It would just be great for. It would be great for college football to see Syracuse. I know this sounds kind of biased as a New Yorker myself, but it would just be great for college football to see Syracuse good again, considering the history of the program itself and how many people have gone through Syracuse. So we'll take one last look on here, and I want to get your opinions on who finishes first and who's finishing last in the ACC.
Before I do that, I would just like to mention kind of some things about Florida State.
Yeah.
I actually was finishing their schedule prediction. I have them going 7-5.
I like that.
So it's not where they were a couple years ago, but it's in the right direction. But pretty much they're losing to every good team on the schedule. I believe I had them losing to Pitt, Miami, Florida, Alabama, and I would have to look for the other team. Oh, Clemson. So they have a lot of teams that are on the bottom in the ACC, but pretty much when I did the write-ups, any team that was bad against the run, which was a lot, I had them winning because Gus Malzahn's great at running the ball. Everything Tommy Castellanos from Boston College, he's a great runner. He's not necessarily a great passer. And they have 3 transfer wide receivers coming in: Deuce Robinson from USC, Gavin Blackwell from North Carolina, and Squirrel White from Tennessee. My main worry for them is since Norvell's been there, he's been very heavy in the transfer portal, which can get you a good year. But you saw last year, if you don't hit the right transfers, there's going to be a year back. So he's really got to start developing talent, which one of the recruits they got was Usman Kroma, running back. And they already have him as like the 1B with Gavin Sawchuk, the running back from Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So they should be able with them and Castellanos, running the ball should be very high, be able to do that. The question is, can they improve that defense, everything? But I think Florida State will be better. How much better than their season last year? Still kind of up in the air. And now back to your main question. I think Clemson's going to win the ACC. And I personally think Stanford might be the worst team in the conference.
I don't hate that. For anybody listening right now, make sure you guys are following Brandyn at Haye3. He is going to be our UCF and FSU correspondent. He'll also be overseeing some other stuff in other conferences with Georgia Southern and some other games. So make sure you guys are giving him a follow there. Actually, I completely forgot that Gavin was on Florida State, and I wanted to get your opinion on this before I dive in, because I do actually agree with who you have finishing last in the conference, but I do want your thoughts on Tommy Castellanos going there now, because he did, get, I would say he got benched at Boston College. So what are your thoughts on him, and how do you think he's going to perform in that offense?
So I think it's funny. Well, one of the games I kind of had a comparison between him and Kyron Drones. They're both super inconsistent, but they can have really great games. Castellanos had some big upsets at Boston College. I just don't know I think he's great off script. Like, he's great at avoiding sacks, and then finding I think sometimes he doesn't read defenses very well. I think the most passing yards he's ever had in the season was around 2,500. And Gus had struggled at UCF getting the passing game going. And, I think there's a great opportunity for Castellanos, but there's been some rumors and things, there's the smack talk to Alabama, which I kind of put that Florida State might have been able to sneak one out, because Alabama usually starts off slow the season, but that's not going to be there now. And I heard there's some going back and forth where Castellanos has mentioned that he wished he stayed at BC, which is a weird thing, seeing how he left immediately after he got benched. So I do wonder. I think Florida State, obviously, I don't have them beating Alabama, but they play, I think it's East Texas A&M, whoever the Lions are, and Kent State after that, who went 0-12 last year. I think they need to blow out those two teams, because if they start off, say they just win by field goal in either of those games, I think you could see something like last year where the wheels come off. Because I think Castellanos is, when things are going well, he looks really good. And I haven't necessarily seen him fight through that adversity as well. So, and we saw, of course, they had tons of adversity last year. So I think that's the main point, just fighting through that. And there's been reports that Gus hasn't been overly happy with how involved Norvell has been in the offense. So if that's going to be a constant power struggle, then that could be a big issue for the team.
Yeah, you actually already answered what I was just about to ask you. So I do appreciate that. That's going to be an interesting dynamic as that folds going into the season. Take a look at this list one more time. This is the ACC Power Index. They have Clemson at 1, Wake Forest dead last. I'm going to differentiate a little bit. I know I said I agreed that I think actually Stanford Cardinal would finish last in the ACC. Just based on their team structure, nothing against them personally, or Frank Reich, who I think is a great guy and great coach, and Andrew Luck. Obviously, they're probably going to build something there. Just not happening this year. But I actually have SMU slightly edging number 1 on here. That's going to be pretty hot takey, because I know that Clemson's kind of chalk at number 1 in the ACC. I just really love what Rhett Lashley is doing at head coach. I'm a big fan of Kevin Jennings and stuff and the success that he's been able to have from his time in the American to now in the ACC and the P4. He's still playing well, and he's still young enough to where he can succeed going forward. So now we're about to hit the final P4 conference, and this one, I mean, this is your conference, man, at least as a fan. For those who don't know, Brandon is actually a Michigan Wolverines fan, and we're going to take a look at this Big Ten power index here. A lot of teams here. First up, I'm sure he's going to love this one, is Ohio State Buckeyes. At number 1, we have Penn State Nittany Lions. Number 2, Oregon Ducks, rounding out the top 3. We have the USC Trojans at number 4, your Michigan Wolverines at 5, and then 6 through 10 we have the Indiana Hoosiers, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the Iowa Hawkeyes, the Washington Huskies, and the Illinois Fighting Illini. And then rounding out the rest of the group, we have the Wisconsin Badgers, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, Minnesota Golden Gophers, the UCLA Bruins, Michigan State Spartans, Maryland Terrapins, the Northwestern Wildcats, and the Purdue Boilermakers. Now, I want to know, is there any surprises for you on this list here?
I think Illinois is a little low. I thought they would be higher. I think they should be above Iowa. I'm not drinking the Nebraska Kool-Aid. And Indiana does not have a tough schedule, but still, I mean, I think they're a little high for me. And honestly, I think Penn State is overhyped. I think they should probably be in the top 3, but I would put Oregon ahead of them. And I don't know why they think it'll be different this year for USC.
That's USC is an interesting one for me. Give me your thoughts on that one.
The offense took a little, bad seat last year. I think it should be improved this year, but Lincoln Riley's never had a good defense. And we saw that really hurt him last year in the Big Ten. It's not the Pac-12 where you can just outscore people. Yeah. I think it was ridiculous they lost to Michigan because Michigan couldn't throw the ball. They scored. They needed a touchdown at the end of the game with like 3 minutes to go, and I don't know if they completed a pass on that drive.
I don't think they did.
It was crazy. Like, I just don't get that. I don't know how they're that high, and I don't know why people keep on getting fooled by Lincoln Riley. They always have them high like this, competing and everything, and my honest opinion is if he didn't do it with Caleb Williams, he's not going to do it now.
I don't hate that opinion. I genuinely don't hate that opinion. For me, I actually think the Michigan State Spartans are a little low. The coach who took over, I'm gonna blank on his name right now, but he has always started. I believe it was the former Oregon State head coach.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I can't remember his name right now. So he's started every year he's had for his first season has always been the build from the ground year, and he hasn't necessarily done it with highly recruited players, but he's always found a way to do it within the program, right? And I really think that the team that he has there right now, I think Aiden Childs can be pretty good. I did get to see him live. He struggled, at the beginning of that week 1 game, and I know people, are gonna be like, hey, it was Florida Atlantic, but numbers wise, they didn't do terribly defensively last year. They had a good defense, especially in that game. Before everything fell off with Tom Herman, and that's something that we may talk. I may discuss later in the second half of the show when we hit the G5 or G6 now, whatever we're calling these now. But I think Childs is great there. I really think he's kind of an underrated guy, and I think the coaching staff is a little underrated too. It's the Big Ten is great, but I don't see why they would finish behind the likes of a Minnesota, of a Rutgers. I'm not too high on Rutgers. Me and you have talked about Aiden Kaliak-Manis before. I don't think
he's not good. He's not good.
I don't think he's starting material, and I don't think he has enough as a passer to make that team a good team. Now, they did get C.J. Campbell from Florida Atlantic, ironically, and I think he's going to be good. I just don't know if the rest of that team is going to be good. But then just hitting back at Michigan State a little bit, Nick Marsh, the wide receiver they have there, I think he's going to be really good. And if no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Nick Marsh might be the best receiver in his class. Because he was a freshman last year. He did great. They brought in some good talent. Minnesota is a weird team because they should never be, in my eyes, as good as they are. But I think PJ Fleck is super corny, but he's a great coach. Rutgers, they have a ton of running backs, good running backs. But I'm like, how? Some teams, I just don't understand how you can never get like a good quarterback. As Rutgers, I thought Gavin Wimsatt was going to be good. It never really worked. Like Wisconsin hasn't been able to really get that. Minnesota has really not been able to get that. Really, Maryland, Northwestern, even Purdue. I'm just like, I don't understand why they can never get a good quarterback. And that is, Iowa as well. If any of those teams could get consistent quarterback play, because a lot of those teams run the ball really well and play good defense. Another sleeper team for me is Washington. I think what Jed Fish is doing there, Denzel Boston at wide receiver, I really like. I think he's not thought of very highly. I don't think Washington's winning it, but I think they could finish in 6 to 8 in the conference, which would be good for them.
Yeah, I think Washington's a good pick as a sleeper. I'm a little surprised, as we mentioned before, that Illinois is a little bit lower, considering the year that they had. They're another team. This is kind of like ground and pound central, in terms of the college football sphere. At least for some of the better teams. I know it's a little mix of both, especially with Ohio State and Oregon on there, and USC. But with that said, I do think that Indiana, I think you're sleeping on Indiana, man. Fernando Mendoza, he's working with Kurt Signetti, former JMU guy. He worked with his brother, Mendoza's brothers there. I think we're going to see a Mendoza tandem just keep going down the list, and Indiana's going to keep going up. At least I hope so.
I like Mendoza, and I like Surratt at wide receiver. They have some good. I think some of the things that Nettie does is just really worn on me.
That's fair.
I think what took the cake for me was some of the games he was trying to not. I felt like he had a number in his head, and he was like, "Once I know we're going to lose, I don't want to lose by this number." And I hate that. I mean, James Franklin. I'm going. Excuse my Michigan fandom, but in 2016, Michigan was beating Penn State like 42-0, and he kicked a field goal with like 3 minutes left, just so like they didn't get shut out.
I respect it. I respect
it. So anyway, and also I think the thing was with I know Penn State got one of your the wide receivers from Syracuse, Pena, and I think James Franklin holds that team back. He gets great talent in there. I just think I don't know if you watched the Monday night game this past week, NFL, the Bengals. Mitchell Tinsley had a monster game. He played at Western Kentucky, transferred to Penn State his final year. I thought he was going to be a great player, and the offense just never really worked out. Parker Washington, when he was the main guy, it didn't work out. I just think the passing game just never gets going. I think Drew Aller is getting wasted there. I know a lot of people like his talent, which he just doesn't show up in those big games. And, it'll be interesting because there's a lot of new quarterbacks in this league. Yeah. Aller might be the best one, returning one. We don't know with Ohio State and Michigan, new quarterbacks. We don't know what they're necessarily going to do. I believe USC got a transfer. And transfer with Indiana, Nebraska, Raiola. So it's a lot of unknown. I will say the bottom of the Big Ten is bad.
Purdue, Northwestern for sure.
It looks like Maryland's going to be pretty bad. I think Michigan State's going to be competitive. I would have them higher up, maybe like where Wisconsin is. But what I've been hearing is not great things from Wisconsin either. So I don't know where they're going because it seems like they try to change their identity from what they've always been, ball control, run the ball, the defense, to be more of a spread type team, and it just blew up in their face. So I don't know if they want to change back because personnel might not necessarily fit, but they've really struggled in the last couple of years with Luke Fickell.
Yeah, and quickly, I wanted to get your thoughts on Michigan before we make our final, prediction on here, and then again get you out of here. Michigan, your team, you're a big fan of Michigan. How do you think? First off, what do you think about the findings of that potential, cheating allegations, and then just what do you think Michigan ends up doing this year?
I'm going to keep it short with that part because I could rant quite a bit. People at there's some people that I think don't totally understand football. They're jumping all over that. Obviously, they broke the letter of the law. I'll say that because when this first happened, before everyone was getting pithy, the NCAAs even said it wasn't that big a deal and all this other stuff. And they say, they were one of the only teams that got penalized in season for something, so to say that the light sentence, things already happened. I'll just go into that. What happened in the past happened in the past, the people that think that they should get things taken away are always going to think that. So there's nothing you can do about that. But as far as the team, I've heard great things about Bryce Underwood. I question how good the wide receivers will play this year. But from everything I heard, they did not speak glowingly of Kirk Campbell, the offensive coordinator from last year. Samaj Morgan pretty much said he didn't know what he was doing and said that the offense is totally different. They have his name's escaping, but he was offensive coordinator at North Carolina for a while. So it should be more a more open offense, but they're still going to have those running principles. They bring back Jordan Marshall, who looked good against Alabama. Justice Haynes from Alabama, kind of 1-2 punch. They did just lose a tackle that was a freshman that was supposed to start, but he had a knee injury. I think the defense is going to be good yet again because a lot of people are saying, since Michigan lost both the defensive tackles, but they've recruited very well on the defensive line and developed that quite a bit. It just really will be, there's some tough games, but I don't think the schedule is nearly as difficult as people say. And I don't think people understand how bad that offense was last year, and they still won 7 games.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm very curious to see how they perform. Now, before we do get you out of here, going through this list, who do you got finishing first? Who you got finishing last?
I have Oregon winning first, finishing first, and the bottom is kind of a mess. But I mean, they've been horrible the last couple of years, so I'm going to go with Purdue finishing last.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on Purdue finishing last. This may be a little hot takey, but I'm kind of chalk here. I actually have Ohio State, and don't be mad at me for this one, but I have Ohio State finishing first. I think Saban's going to come in. I think he's going to rip it and dish it in that offense with Ryan Day. And I just think they have a great team. It'll be interesting to see how they perform because the schedule is always something to keep an eye on. But those are my picks. Before we get you out of here, brother. I know you're gonna hate me for that. But before we get you out of here, let everybody know where they can find you out on your social medias.
Yeah, you can find me on, I'm going to say Twitter because it's always going to be Twitter to me, at HayB3. You'll find, like Tom saying, some UCF coverage, either me or Randy, and then Florida State coverage as well as some coverage on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And make sure to look out for Georgia Southern and possibly Coastal Carolina in the coming weeks.
All right, awesome. You guys are first. Brandyn, thank you for being on. And now we're going to go from the P4 section of this show, and now we are in the back half. We are going to talk some G5 football. Brandyn, thank you for coming on, and I'll see you in a bit. All right, now we're going to take a very, very quick, couple second intermission. We're going to bring on Brandyn Pokrass of the League Winners, who is our East Coast correspondent. We're also going to bring in Mackenzie Neglia, who is our USF Bulls correspondent. So before that, we're going to just take a very quick intermission. All right, we got Brandyn Pokrass here, and we have Mackenzie in the waiting room. But before we get Mackenzie out here, I do want to play. She did send in a nice clip of what she expects from the USF Bulls and their season this year. So before we get talking on these G5/G6, whatever we want to call it, we're going to play her clip and bring her in.
Hey everyone, this is Mackenzie Neglia. I cover South Florida football for the League Winners. My regular season prediction for this year is that the Bulls will go 8-4, and I think two key players to keep an eye out for are quarterback Byron Brown, who's returning from a leg injury that he suffered last season. He's been doing very well throughout fall camp, so we'll see him back in action as QB1. And then over on defense, linebacker Mac Harris, who led the team in tackles last season, he's expected to be a big contributor for USF once again. But I go into much more detail on my predictions for the season and updates on everything Bulls football in my articles, so make sure to check those out. But thank you all for watching, and we'll be back with more very soon.
Oh, and I'll bring her in, and I made the mistake of not blocking myself or Brandyn out of there. Sorry about that. I do apologize. So Brandyn, we'll start with you. Brandyn, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. I'm very happy to be on a podcast with everyone. Feels like it's very, very much overdue, but really excited to be talking some college football. I mean, week 0 is this weekend, and then we're off and running next week.
Absolutely. Mackenzie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm very excited to be here. How are you guys?
We're doing fantastic. So I'm going to do what I did with everybody else. We're going to take a quick look at the American Power Index. That is going to be the American Conference and what they are expecting from this season. So we're just going to go through the entire list here. First place they have with the Tulane Green Wave, and then rounding out the top 3 is the Memphis Tigers and our South Florida Bulls. 4th and 5th is the UTSA Roadrunners and the Navy Midshipmen. And then rounding out the top 10, we have East Carolina, Florida Atlantic Owls, Army Black Knights, North Texas Mean Green, and the Rice Owls. And then the final 4 of the group are the Charlotte 49ers, the UAB Blazers, the Temple Owls, and the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. Now, I'll start with Brandyn there. Brandyn, are there any surprises to you on this list?
Not really. I mean, I feel like, especially when you're looking at the American, it's a very clear distinction between the haves and the have-nots. Tulane is going to be up there. It's one of the better G5 programs, G6 programs in the entire country, not just the American Conference. The same goes for Memphis. I think ESPN's Power Index is getting a bit ahead of the curve on USF. I think this is a team that is veteran heavy. I think this is a team that could take that big step forward. Their overall roster, I'm really a fan of, whether it is those older players or the younger players. And I think that they very much could be in contention for that American Conference title if a few things break their way. And then looking at the rest of that, UTSA, I think, is going to be solid. Navy is going to be solid. East Carolina, I'm interested to see. They lost some key contributors. I'm interested in if the interim head coach bump was just for last season or if that carries over into this season. And then FAU being ahead of Army and North Texas, I think that is also another case of, and we'll get into it soon too, I think that is another case of ESPN trying to get ahead of the curve, and I would also agree with that.
I like that. And Mackenzie, are there any surprises that you're seeing on here?
I do agree with Brandyn, but I think I am a little surprised about UTSA being up above Navy, and then kind of that race between East Carolina and FAU. I think those two are going to be very close as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting because they have the Power Index ranking there, and just look, they have 71 through 75 all in order, which is kind of interesting for the entirety of the FBS, where it's South Florida is at 71, UTSA 72, Navy 73, East Carolina at 74, and FAU at 75. This is an interesting one because the American, a lot of teams always end up picking and taking from the American to go to their power conferences, whether it's players or coaches. Now, Mackenzie, I want to start with you because you've actually been, you've been present for nearly every single practice at USF. You've been there for the pressers. What are your thoughts around the team and going into the season?
I think it's a very exciting time for USF fans, and there's a lot to look forward to. There's 54 new guys between the freshmen and the transfers coming in. We've seen a lot of new depth, especially in the wide receivers. The D-line is looking very solid, as well as like solidifying those battles in the trenches. So I think that there is a lot to look forward to. There's also a bunch of position battles that we're still looking out for, especially on the defense. But I think that it's going to be very interesting to see how those play out.
Yeah, I know I'll be curious. And for everybody watching or listening at home, make sure you guys are following Mackenzie on her social media. She is our correspondent for USF, and we're fortunate enough to have two of those, to be honest with you, with Brandyn also manning that mantle. Now, Brandyn, I want to get your opinion on Alex Golesh and the culture that he's building at USF, and what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm very happy you brought up culture because Mackenzie and I had a chance to cover Victory Day this past Sunday, and a lot of programs do stuff like this. They're very involved in the community. They want to make a difference in the lives of the people that, they're asked to come to their games and support the program. But it really ties into everything that Coach Golesh talks about in the sense of, the guys he wants to bring to the program, the guys that he wants to add to this culture. And, the fact that he emphasizes the culture so much. I feel like a lot of coaches, especially at the college level, don't always have the opportunity to follow through on what they say. They don't always have the opportunity to really say, hey, I'm going to build this culture and then actually go do it. I really think Golesh is doing it because, for example, at that event, you look at the guys having a blast and really being engaged. That is a huge indicator of the culture you're building. And that's the type of thing that's going to translate to the field because that means your team's all working in one direction. And that means you're going to be ready for that adversity and be ready for those hard times because you are that close-knit group and you do have a lot of high character guys.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's going to be, It's so interesting because we've all talked about this, that USF, it just seems like it's on the cusp of becoming like the top echelon of the American Conference. So actually, I want to stick with Brandyn for this one. Do you think that there's an eventuality where they end up potentially leaving the American?
I think once things are more settled, I think we're still in this very like hectic phase of college football. I think once, for example, the on-campus stadium's built, and once their facilities are quote unquote more up to par, which I feel like they're up to par, but maybe a P4 conference is looking for something specific. And then when USF gets that, then that's something to look forward to. But look, at the end of the day, P4 conferences want programs that are winning football games. And USF has done that over the past few years. They've been to 2 straight bowl games. Now it's about taking that next step. If you take that next step with a defense that I think has a lot of key difference makers at positions where a lot of other teams in this conference are turning over those positions, I think the fact that they have a lot of continuity at a lot of different positions, they're really in a good spot to take that next step. And once they take that next step, then more eyes are on them. And then they see the stadium, and then they see the facilities. And then, the ball kind of gets rolling there, where when that next wave of conference realignment comes up, because let's face it, it's inevitable. I do think USF is going to be on that short list of teams for whether it's the Big 12, whether it's, the Pac-12. You can run through the list of different conferences. Maybe it's the ACC if they lose their Florida presence, right? You don't know. You don't know how things are going to play out. I would have never thought that Texas and Oklahoma would ever leave the Big 12. That was a staple of my entire childhood. Guess what? They're in the SEC now, and the Pac-12 up until next year basically doesn't exist. So it's one of those things where you just have to keep your eye on it. But I do think USF is going to be in a good position to be set up for success in that next wave.
Yeah, and like you kind of said, that they do have, out of all the G5, G6, whatever we want to call them, they do have the potential of being one of those on the short list of making that jump to the power conference level. And part of that is, playing good opponents. And what better way to start their season than to face 3 ranked opponents for the first 3 weeks of the season? They've been 0-18 against ranked opponents in their last 18 matchups. Mackenzie, I want to go for you this one before we let you out. I don't want to keep you too long. You have them going 8-4 this season. How do you expect those first 3 weeks to play out?
So I think I'm going to switch my original pick, because initially I said that they would lose against Boise and then win against Florida and lose against Miami. But I think that the team has enough to make a splash. I think the season opener is going to bring a lot of attention. I think that there's going to be a lot going on, and that energy might be able to push them over the edge for this one, because it is very tough first 3 weeks. So I'm going to say that we go and win against Boise and then lose against Florida and Miami.
I don't hate that. It's a very tough schedule for South Florida, and if they're able to do that, you got to assume that if they're even able to win 2 out of those 3, you got to assume that they'll be taken a lot more seriously within the national audience. Now, before I get you out of here, Mackenzie, do you think that USF is going to be competing for the American championship this year?
I think it's definitely possible. I think that kind of motivation, so to speak, or the first 3 weeks are really going to dictate how the season could play out. But again, like, you're still going. Even after those first 3 games, it's a good South Carolina State team. Then you have very tough, conference play after that. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think that they definitely have a chance to.
Yeah, and if that power list and power index is any indication, I guess Vegas and ESPN do feel like they have a chance as well. Before we get you out of here, Mackenzie, can you just let everybody know where they can find you out on your social media?
Yeah, all my coverage is on my Twitter, so it's at my first and last name, which is Mackenzieneglia.
All right, perfect. That's Mackenzie Neglia for the League Winners covering USF Bulls football. Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on.
course. Thank you, guys.
All right, so that was Mackenzie. Now, Brandyn, I'm sure everybody knows by now that you are the Florida Atlantic guy of the group. Let's hear your breakdown of FAU.
So I think when it comes to FAU, this is a team that I would classify as the word unknown, because there are a lot of unknowns when it comes to FAU, right? So whether you want to look at the offensive side of the ball with, obviously Caden Velkamp and Easton Messer, those are the guys that I feel like are, you need to focus on them, right? You have to focus on them. They're the guys that were targeted. They were brought in. They played in the Boca Raton Bowl. Fans got a glimpse of them in that game, but I really think that connection is going to be huge. But even if we go throughout the roster, right, the running back position is fascinating. In his media availability today, Zach Kittley mentioned that it looks like the Owls are going to have a 3-headed monster. So from other pressers, looks like that's going to be a mix of Jamari Sands, Xavier Terrell, and Caden Shields-Dudden. I'm a big fan of all three players. I think all three players have a shot to break out onto the scene, a la CJ Campbell from last year. He also mentioned that they may go with a hot hand approach. So let's say, for example, Terrell gets things rolling week 1 against Maryland, and week 2, he might go for a little bit. And then if Sands gets hot, they go with him. Like, there's so much potential in that room where I feel like it's all predicated on how they want to attack different defenses and how they want the game plan to go a specific way. The same goes for the wide receiver room, right? We've had a bunch of conversations. I brought up the 3 freshmen that they brought in Jade Card, Brandon Hoke, and Michael Calix. It feels like they're making highlight plays every single day. And that's not even touching upon the slew of other wideouts that this team has, right? They brought in a lot of offensive line transfers. Flipping over to the defense, they brought in a lot of defensive line transfers in the winter and spring portals. The linebacker room, whether it's some of the younger guys from previous recruiting classes or guys they brought in, a la Tyler Stolsky, who was named the team captain. The secondary, you look at on 247, look at this team's transfer list. They brought in close to 7 defensive back transfers. Yeah. And there's a lot of guys with talent. Someone I want to shout out in terms of that on the transfer side of things, Duda Rogers, he seems to be a guy that's going to get on the field right away, right? You have a few other guys that look to potentially get on the field right away. This is a team that has a lot of unheralded, unproven talent. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to games, that might take a little bit to translate to success. Let's not kid ourselves. Last year was not a great year for FAU. And we could say that in a lot of different ways, but let's just get straight to the point. It wasn't a great year. As much optimism as I have in a lot of different ways for this program, this is year 1. Now, right, what I will say is if we go through their schedule, the back half of the schedule has potential for a lot of wins. I want to highlight specifically the back 4-game stretch of Tulsa, Tulane, UConn, and East Carolina. Now, obviously, Tulane, I think, is going to be one of the better teams in the conference, obviously. But that also ties into the fact, and I'm sure we'll dive into it, I think FAU is going to be humming by the end of the year. I really think that a lot of the kinks they need to work out, and we'll go over that, are going to be out of the way. And then outside of that Tulane game, I truly think FAU should beat Tulsa, should beat UConn, should beat East Carolina. Now, if you win those 4 games, you got to mix in 2 other wins throughout the year. And there's plenty of opportunities to do so.
Yeah, especially they play Florida A&M second week of the season. That's a great bounce back, depending on what happens at Maryland. Now, I know that, talking to Kittley and seeing some of the stuff that's gone on there, they haven't necessarily been showing a lot in camp to you guys, but what do you expect from a Kittley offense? Offensive side, just some of the stuff you've seen at Tech, obviously, and then just some of the stuff we've had with conversations with Kittley that the both of us have had.
I think that it's going to depend. And I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but in a lot of his appearances, Coach Kittley's really emphasize that the scheme is going to be predicated based on the players. And if you look at his track record, that's the truth. He broke all levels of college football passing records with Bailey Zappi. He also ran the ball a ton at Texas Tech with Taj Brooks. He can do whatever the personnel dictates. And let's face it, we don't know what a lot of this personnel can do yet in a game setting. There is a lot of raw talent and a lot of guys that have potential to be great, but we haven't seen it on the field yet. We don't know what they do best. We don't know what a game situation calls for, but that's why having a mind like Kitley, that's why having a young coaching staff overall is so important, because they're going to be able to grow with the guys. They're going to be able to find what works with the guys and be able to really determine, hey, what is the best way for us to win football games, and go from there.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning of the show, for those who aren't aware, Caden Velkamp, who is going to be the starter at Florida Atlantic, he followed Kitley. Kitley's the guy who recruited him when he was at Western Kentucky, and then Velkamp and Easton Messer. Remember those two names? They both traveled with Kitley for the offense. We know the offense is should be good on paper. Well, it remains to be seen how that defense will shake out. But before we get to the next conference, I do want to get your thoughts on this here. Going through the first part of the show, we go through who we have winning, who we have losing. So who do you have winning the American Conference, and who takes last place for you?
Ooh, I think that, drum roll please, I think that Tulane is going to win the conference. However, who Tulane will be playing in the American Conference Championship is going to be USF. I think that Memphis is going to take a slight step back. And now my main thinking with that is, as good of a roster as Memphis has, they had the same quarterback for a very long time there, which is a very, very different and old-fashioned thing to have in college football. They do not have Seth Hennigan anymore. That is going to be either Brendan Lewis or
it is Brendan. He was just named starter.
He was named the starter. Then it's going to be Lewis, and they have they have one of the best quarterbacks in the pass recruiting class as the backup. That's going to be an adjustment. That is going to be something that, just like in FAU, Memphis is going to have to figure out and work through the kinks and get rolling. And I think that portion of their schedule, especially considering who they're playing, might be the difference between them making it, a UTSA making it, and a USF making it.
And who do you have finishing last in this conference here?
Now, I know we could, just go chalk based on the power index from ESPN. I think it's going to be UAB. I have no confidence in Trent Dilfer. I think Trent Dilfer is horrific. I think this UAB program, where they're located, the money they have, could be a sleeping giant in college football. It just so happens they have a very bad head coach.
I'm going to stay mum on that one. For me personally, I guess I kind of have to go Tulane as well. It's just, Summerall's put together a great program there. It's kind of hard to go against that until he shows otherwise. I thought they were going to take a step off once he took over, and they haven't. They've looked great. I guess I feel bad on this one because I think I'm going to go chalk here, and I think I'm going to take Tulsa last. I just don't know what they're able to do differently. But I do, before we get to the next conference,
I want to interject real fast. And this is a question that, P4 conferences, I think it's a lot different. Looking at this conference, how many of these coaches do you think upper level schools try to poach at the end of the year? Now, we don't have to dive into specifics because obviously that's still, very, very tough to figure out. But I guess if I set the line at 3.5, are you going the over or the under?
See, I was thinking in my head at 3 even, because I'd have Summerall's potentially being poached. Golish is probably going to try to get people try to poach Golish, and oh my God, I'm going to blank on the guy's name.
Silverfield.
Yes. Well, Silverfield too, and Trailer signed a contract, so that's a little different, and I can't discuss certain stuff on air. But I guess I would take it. I'd take an over. I guess I would take an over there. I would say probably about 4 would be my number.
I think it's tough because I don't think Golish leaves USF. I think Golish stays. 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 I think G
I don't think so either.
If they have a big time season, I mean, they're built. Everything's lining up for USF to potentially once again be one of those programs down the line, as we just spoke about.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to take the under, but I think the ones that could leave may be gigantic. And by the ones, I mean the one. I think this could be the year that Summerall gets poached.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if any of these guys leave. We're just talking, hypotheticals. But
season hasn't started yet. Season hasn't started yet.
Just as a disclaimer, there is something I did want to go before we get into the Conference USA. And that's actually the Temple Owls, who are second to last year, but they actually have a head coach that you're familiar with, Casey Keeler. How do you think? Do you think it's a 1 year, and after this year they'll kind of get it together? Do you think he's able to kind of turn that program around immediately?
I think we're looking at a very similar situation to when Alex Golesh came into USF. I think we're going to see that upward trajectory for Temple over the next few years. Because, I know that they've been bad for a decent amount of time. This is a football program that has a history of success. This is a football program that has been really good. And let's face it, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, there's a lot of really damn good football in the Northeast. There's a lot of really damn good football players in the Northeast, and that's only improving over the years. Whether it's Delaware, Pennsylvania, Jersey, New York, having a guy with those roots in a position like Temple is great. And also, let's think about it like this. There are not that many teams on the legitimate East Coast that are FBS programs. I don't think it's inconceivable that the next tier under Rutgers, Temple could easily step right back into that.
Yeah, it would be great to see the Temple Owls be good once again. So that's that we're going to wrap up the American, and we're actually going to head into Conference USA, which we'll take a look at this list here. This is actually an interesting power index because I wasn't expecting this, to be honest with you. First, we have the Liberty Flames. Second, we have the Jacksonville State Gamecocks, and rounding out the top three is Sam Houston Bearcats. Fourth is Florida International Panthers. Love to see FIU there. Fifth, running up the top five, is the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. And then 6 through 10, we have the Missouri State Bears, Louisiana Tech Bulldogs, the Delaware Blue Hens, who jump up from the FCS, Kennesaw State Owls, and the UTEP Miners. And then the final two teams here are the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders and the New Mexico State Aggies. Brandon, are there any surprises for you on this list?
I am shocked that they have Missouri State over Delaware. I really am. That's something I was not expecting. Full disclosure, I have not seen these football power index rankings from ESPN. I did not look at it before the show. I did not have an idea of, what was going to be pulled up. I'm actually very surprised that it's not only, a few up in the conference, but it's like a decent sized gap. Like I personally would have those two flipped. Now, would I say that either team is destined for immediate success this year? No, but I have a bit more confidence in Delaware than I do Missouri State, especially considering schedules.
Yeah, for me, my kind of surprise is Western Kentucky still staying at 5. I know that they lost a lot of guys. They lost Keyshawn Johnson, wide receiver last year. They lost another guy. I'm going to blank on his name, so I apologize in advance. But he was a big showing in that bowl game too. Alongside Easton Messer, of course, and Caden Velkamp, who we just discussed, went to Florida Atlantic. I am a little surprised there. Love seeing Florida International there. We'll start with you, because for anybody who's not familiar, Brandon actually also covers the Florida International Panthers as our on-site beat reporter. Brandon, what are your thoughts on the schedule, and give your thoughts on the team? Who's standing out to you?
I think that this has the potential to be a very, very good season for the Panthers. And I want to start on the offensive side of things, right? Keewan Jenkins has been all over all sorts of quarterback watch list, award watch list, and I think it's warranted. I really do. I think he had a really solid year last year, but the main thing that I would highlight is that his growth within the scheme so far has been just amazing to watch, right? New scheme comes in the spring, and He's doing some good things, but you can tell it's like he's learning and he's adjusting and getting used to a new scheme. Even for NFL quarterbacks, we see that it takes a ton of time.
Yeah.
Coming out of the spring into the fall, there's been a noticeable difference in a very good way. He's decisive. He's making the right reads. The ball's out on time. It's accurate. I'm not going to dive into specifics, but there's a lot of really, really good stuff happening there. And that's not including the run game, who with KJ Owens, I'm a huge fan of. And that's not including Devontae Lyons, who I think has a claim to being the best player I've watched on either side of the ball for the Panthers throughout the spring and the fall. They have a lot of different wideouts that they can use. Yeah. I think Alex Perry, alongside Keelan Jenkins, has taken a great leap from the spring to the fall. I feel like he's going to be locked in as that number one target for him. Yeah. But it's not just him, right? We got Kyle McNeil. We got Eric Nelson Jr. We got a freshman that has been bursting onto the scene a little bit in Amari Isaac. I'm excited to see how he looks on the field, but man, he's just he's jacked, and he does not look like a freshman in the sense of how he runs his routes, how he plays the game, and how he is just attacking everyday practice from what I've seen. That once again, that's not including the tight end. Like, there's a lot of different things that I'm optimistic about. Now, we need to see it on the field, right? It's one thing going against the same unit you practice against every single day. It's another playing a team on the field. However, I will say I'm also excited about a few different elements of the Panthers defense. If you want to go there yet, I can dive into it. If not, I can hold off a little bit.
No, I want to hear it. Let me get it.
So I think if I were to classify the main strength for the FIU Panthers defense, it's their secondary. Obviously you got Deuce Blades, who is on the Shrine Bowl 1000 watch list, extremely well deserved. He's made a ton of really good plays over the spring. They have, a kid, Josiah McGrew, who has been all over the field. Victor Evans III. I mean, whether it's the spring game, having 2 interceptions, or just, once again, dominating practice and coverage, he's been arguably my favorite defensive back to watch over the spring and throughout the summer. Kenan Simmons, a JUCO transfer, I've really enjoyed how he's really played and how he's attacked getting after the passer. And there's a lot of other guys scattered throughout this, right? There's a lot of other guys that I'm very, very, very excited to see how they translate to the field. And I think that's really the main thing I would highlight. If someone like you asked me, okay, what's your perspective on FIU? It's the fact that these guys have grown so much from the start of the spring until now. The right culture is being implemented under Billy Simmons, the right practice mentality. They're having fun and they're competing, but you're seeing them develop. You're seeing them become better football players. And that's going to be so big, because the second part of what you asked, obviously, is what to expect in terms of maybe a record, right? Conference USA is, to put it in a perspective after talking about the American Conference, it's like that, but on an even bigger level, because you have the American schools coming and poaching. You have the Sun Belt coming and poaching on top of your P4. So you want to look at that power index, right? I am a huge fan of the Western Kentucky coaching staff. They've done it year after year after year. What if it doesn't happen this year? Right? I think Sam Houston, what a huge part of their success was Keeler. Guess what? He's on that Temple. He's with that Temple program that I was just speaking about. And I think he's going to be the main reason that Temple turns around things, right? Liberty completely rated. You Jacksonville State basically flipped over an entire roster. Like, we were talking about the upper level programs of this conference having to go through massive upheaval. So when you look at that, right? And I'm not talking about the beginning part of the schedule, because beginning part of the schedule for FIU, Bethune-Cookman, I think that's a win. Going to Penn State, I'm going to put it out there. If FIU is within 20 points of Penn State in this game, which I don't think is off the table, but I don't think it's likely, that's a gigantic win for that program in every single sense of the word. I think Coach Simmons is going to have them ready to play. But like, we are talking about the number 2 program in the country. Just a little bit of a talent gap, just a little bit, and that's That's not their fault. Then we get into the shoeable, right? Which I've had my the Mr. Host of the show.
You do not have to give your winner or loser on this.
I'm not gonna dive into it because you're gonna have to check out my schedule prediction article to see who wins this game. I'm not giving away anything for free. But what I will say, I think this is gonna be an amazing game. I think this is going to be an amazing game between both teams. I think both teams are very similar. I think both coaches are really damn good. I think you're going to see a lot of points. I think you're going to see some big defensive plays. Now, who comes out on top? Like I said, not giving away that for free, but you're going to have to check out my article. And then we dive into CUSA play, Conference USA play. I think that, going up against Delaware, I think FIU wins that, especially at home. Going to UConn, that's tough. That is a tough game for anyone to go to. I think there's a shot FIU wins. I don't think they do. But then they come back home for Kennesaw State, Vice Night, move to ESPN2. If you didn't catch that, I think that's a win.
Nice.
I think they beat Missouri State. I think they beat Middle Tennessee. Liberty, I don't have that as a win. Could easily see that becoming a win.
Yeah.
Jacksonville State, I think they win that. And Sam Houston, I think they win that. So in a very similar way to FAU, I think they're going to hit the ground running in the back half of their season. Here's the difference, though. Conference USA is not the same type of conference as the American. So FIU hitting the ground running with the talent that they've shown glimpses of and the coaching that I think they have, I think we could be in store for at a minimum, a bowl appearance. And on the upper side of things, ceiling-wise, could be looking at a potential conference champion competing level team.
Yeah, that's interesting. You say that,
and we're talking like upper tier.
I got something hot takey at the end of the Conference USA segment here. But actually, speaking of that, I do cover. So for people who don't know, I do cover Syracuse Orange. I also cover the Delaware Blue Hens. Zach Marker, quarterback. He looks good. He's going to be the starting quarterback there. He looks really good. And then we have Jake Thaw, Jake Thaw is like a do-it-all receiver. He's a Jets fan. He's a fan of me and Brandon's Jets work from before we started doing this stuff. So that's always very cool to see. And, they have Finton Bros, who was actually named to the Shrine Bowl 1000. For those who aren't aware, they did take the step up from the CAA to the FBS. So they were an FCS team. They are now an FBS team. And just taking a look again, at the CUSA standings, they're not the bottom of the barrel. Kind of surprised me doing the jump up. I do think they have some difficulties within the trenches, but what team's not going to have that jump going from the FCS to the FBS? I think the coach there, I think Carty's going to Coach Carty is going to do a good job getting his team acclimated. And let's see if we can get this full screen here. So we got interesting Conference USA power rankings right here, power index. So before we get on to the Sun Belt quick, Brandon, who do you have winning? Who do you have losing this conference, first and last?
So I'm going to start with last place. I think we're looking at a last place finish for UTEP. I just think that, I'm not exactly high on them, but I also think Kennesaw State has potential to be in that bottom tier. I think New Mexico. I think Middle Tennessee. I think, in a similar way to where some conferences are very clumped at the top, I think you're going to have a lot of clump at the bottom for this conference. And then my conference winner, very, very tough. I do think FIU is going to push for an appearance, but at the end of the day, I'm probably going to go with Liberty. I don't feel good about my pick. I don't feel like, set it in ink and write it down for a variety of different reasons. But it's one of those things where if you told me Western Kentucky wins it, I think that's realistic. If you told me that Jacksonville State won it, I think that's realistic. I think in a world where if you say, FIU not catches lightning in a bottle, but in year one of a head coach has maybe 3 wins above expectation, and in a down conference year, they make it and have a shot, I don't think that's out of the question, right? I think you have a group of like 4, maybe 5 teams where I'm like, hey, I can see it happening. But I'm going to lean chalk here. I'm going to say Liberty. They've been a solid Conference USA program. They've been a good college football program, period, since moving up to FBS. And I don't think that changes too much in this upcoming season.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate that. For me, the top is between Liberty and FIU. My hot take is that I think FIU clears it out. I just think Willie Simmons is building a real winner there. And in Conference USA, because of the coaching changes, because of the portal changes that the guys have left, I think that there is a true opening for them to kind of, go into that vacuum and just kind of take over. I think it's very possible. For last place, actually, I have Kennesaw State. Let's check back this list here. I think they were a cute team where, it was kind of a meme for the college football game. Let's play Kennesaw State. But, and props to them for making it to this level. But I just don't think they have the firepower there to necessarily succeed. I mean, the bottom four on that team, I think they could kind of go any way. I even think there's a chance that Delaware, if everything falls off a cliff, they could potentially find themselves there too if they have a quarterback hurt. So I think that's very interesting. For the Conference USA, we're pretty much on the similar page there. So I do want to get you onto the Sun Belt because you do have some familiarity with JMU, and I do want to talk about some JMU stuff with you real quick. And we're going to bring that up and that power rankings up. Where are you at there? Right there. And let's take a look at who we got for the Power Index rankings from ESPN for the Sun Belt Conference. Our James Madison Dukes are at number 1, and our Georgia Southern Eagles are at number 2. Old Dominion rounds out the top 3. For 4 and 5, we have the Louisiana Raging Cajuns and the South Alabama Jaguars. Nice to see them hit 5. 6, we have Marshall, who lost about everybody, but still in 6th place. Georgia State Panthers, that's surprising considering their record last year. Texas State Bobcats at 7. Troy Trojans at 9. And then Arkansas State Red Wolves round out the top 10. App State is outside the top 10 at 11. Coastal is 12. Southern Miss 13, and Louisiana Monroe is at dead last. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Is there any surprises for you here?
The one that would immediately pop out to me is Appalachian State if you didn't know what happened with them in the portal. They lost a lot of guys, and I think that this ranking is kind of anticipating, hey, there's going to be a step back with a new coaching staff, with, a lot of guys not there anymore. This might be a bit of a transition year. And if I were to say the other surprise, I would say that Marshall is still as high as they are. I personally think that the FPI for ESPN is leaning into a little bit of prior records with this team. I mean, if Marshall was able to pull off a decent season, like a middle of the pack Sun Belt season, after basically losing their entire roster, that might be one of the best coaching jobs in the country, period.
Yeah. Literally, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think Marshall, I agree with you. Like, Marshall lost just about everybody. App State lost Joey Aguilar, who performed well for them. And then obviously now he's at Tennessee through a whole loop of changes for him. It's really interesting. I think Coastal is a little too low as well. Coastal didn't do terrible last year. I know they have a transfer coming in, MJ Morris at quarterback, and Emmett Brown are their 2 quarterbacks there. They're both incoming transfers, so I know that always changes some things. I am interested to see that Georgia State is kind of towards the upper half of this, considering how bad they were last year. And App State we kind of talked about as well. But I do want to talk about James Madison because you were with me during their game actually against Georgia State. Bob Chesney, the head coach there, he's done a lot of great things. And now, he has a quarterback, Alonzo, their Alonzo Barnett. He might not be ready for week 1. So he has the Holy Cross quarterback come in who Chesney used to coach. Do you think that they are able to take that top spot? How do you feel about Coach Chesney with the Dukes?
All right. Are we ready to get in the hot take territory? Good.
I'm very interested. Yeah.
I think this team has a shot for the G6 playoff spot, like college football playoff spot.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
I think that in another year of Chesney implementing his program, they didn't really lose. They got look at the end of the day, they did lose some very key contributors, but I'm just a big fan of what they do. I'm a big fan of everything James Madison does. Like truly, like they have one of the best environments in G6. I'm willing to put my neck out there for that. I think their quarterback situation, depth wise, might be one of the best in the country, because I think there's not going to be that much of a fall off, considering what, the as you said, the former Holy Cross quarterback, what he was doing at UNLV before that whole fiasco, looked pretty damn good. Looked pretty damn good in my eyes.
Yeah.
I think that the running back at this school is just I one of my favorites. I think, heading forward, he's a sleeper in terms of like a draft prospect, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
Coming over from North Carolina, he changed that entire offense. He literally is like the centerpiece of what they're doing. And obviously they lost some guys at wideout. I think they have some guys ready to step up. This is just a team that I feel like, whether it's on defense, whether it's on offense, yes, they lost some key guys to graduation or the portal. I think they're going to be ready to roll this season. And more importantly, in terms of the conference, I don't know who else is really like on their level in like an overall perspective. Game to game basis, anything can happen. This is football. Any team can truly beat any team if it's the right day. But when you're looking at it like a bird's eye view, 40,000 foot view, I just don't see another team like on the exact same level as James Madison. I'm just very, very high on them. I think they have a shot to beat some of the bigger teams on their schedule too.
Ooh, that's I don't hate that, because I'm going through, because I want to, what's important to me, obviously, and we talk about this sometimes, is that from the G6 level, trench play is incredibly important. And just looking at their offensive line, they're one of the few G5, G6, whatever we're calling it. They're one of the few teams where their guys are like big guys in the trenches. There are no little men running around in there. They have great running back room with it's George Petaway, and then I think it's Ymir Knight's brother, Wayne. I think it's Wayne.
Yes.
Ymir transferred out, but his brother did stay. So I thought that was interesting. And then Alonzo Barnett, you would want to see him play, but to be honest, I'm not necessarily hurt that they're going to have Chesney's former quarterback there with him. Like, again, like somebody he's familiar with, somebody he played a part in the recruiting process with. And I think that it's really JMU's conference to lose. Now, Georgia Southern is another really, really good team. So I don't want to put them out there, because if anything, I think the first two picks in the Sun Belt are kind of chalk. I think it's going to be James Madison, and then I think it's Georgia Southern, and then I think it's everybody else. But James Madison, with the way Bob Chesney is, and you were sitting in the press conference with me. I know that was a long day. For those who don't know, me and Brandon went on a 3-game and 3-day literal drive through the states.
Adventure. It was an adventure.
Yes, we'll call it that. And so by the third game, which was that James Madison Georgia State game, we were a little bit dead, but still, Chesney, like, his energy is just off the charts for a guy that's for his first year in the program. They didn't take a step down, and then we saw them again in the Boca Bowl and what they did to Caden Veldkamp, Easton Messer, who we just talked about. That was impressive to me, and they did that with backup quarterbacks. So I think that the coaching there, they didn't really lose a step after they lost Kurt Signetti. I think that it's really important, the type of culture that Chesney instills, and I'm very interested to see how it plays out. So before we head out of the Sun Belt, and I let you go here before I head on to the Mountain West and all that stuff, I want to know, I mean, kind of talked about a little bit, but who do you have winning this conference, and who do you have finishing in last?
I mean, look, winning it, I said it. I don't know if I can say it anymore. I do have JMU. Another point I want to bring up, in terms of overall transfer ratings or rankings, they had the number 70 transfer class in the country. That is 1 spot behind Northwestern. That is 2 spots behind Tennessee. That is ahead of Tulane and Florida. and Clemson, which obviously those schools don't necessarily use the portal as much. But I think it's very important to give that context of the type of weight class they're competing in the portal with. And I just think that combined with the recruiting they're able to do at this level, I think they're going to win it. But I do agree with you. I do think Georgia Southern is that number 2. And I think Old Dominion, if a few things break their way, could compete in this conference. Now, for last place, ooh, you know
Last
what?
place is tough.
Actually, it's not as tough as I think. I'm going chalk. I'm going to go with Louisiana Monroe. That program is unfortunately just in a very bad spot right now. They just had their, correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas. They just had their athletic director resign. The football coach is serving as the interim athletic director. It's unfortunately a school in this day and age right now that isn't able to compete in the new age of college football, with the transfer portal and the money and the rev sharing. It's a program that is struggling immensely. And I think even in a conference like the Sun Belt, which, to be fair, is growing and improving every single year, I think they're one of the few programs that is just consistently falling behind. And I don't think that they're in for a good season at all.
Yeah, I hate to agree because it makes for bad podcast, bad television, whatever you want to call it. But I'm kind of right there with you. I have James Madison winning. I have Georgia Southern as a very close second. They'll definitely make a bowl game. But then I do have Louisiana Monroe finishing last, and their AD did resign. You were correct. It was 2 days ago. So he did resign. That's never good for a program, especially one that's already been struggling. So there could be some type of flux there. Hopefully they don't go down a level because they haven't been good in a bit now. But before I get you out of here, let everybody know where they can find you at and what you have coming up.
So, as always, you can find me on Twitter at BPOC24. You can also find me on Blue Sky if you're there. I'm also on Instagram, but the same handle, at BPOC24. Stay tuned for a lot of coverage coming up because I have the FAU schedule prediction, which we kind of touched on. I have the FIU schedule prediction, which we also touched on. Going to be some more high school coverage coming up. Don't have exact games yet, but going to be covering a bit more of Florida high school football, and then we're going to get this season on the show. Get this season rolling on the road, whatever adage you want to use. Very excited to be covering football again for the league winners in 2025. And we're going to be doing it a lot bigger than what we did last year. But as always, Thomas, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you guys are following Brandyn. And Brandyn, thanks for coming on, Brandyn.
Of course. Have a great one.
You too, man. So now that we are done with almost all the GC, we still have one left. Well, I apologize for any Maction lovers, but I'm not going to be doing the Maction. I just personally don't have enough intelligence to sufficiently talk about Maction action. So what we're going to do instead, we are going to hit the Mountain West, and we're going to look at the Mountain West Conference here. We have Boise State Broncos finishing number 1. We have the UNLV Rebels, who we are going to be covering this year, as the number 2. Rounding out the top 3, we have the Fresno State Bulldogs. 4 and 5 is Colorado State Rams and the San Jose Spartans. The Utah Aggies are 6. Wyoming is 7. Hawaii is 8. San Diego is 9, and Air Force is 10. And now, last 2 are the New Mexican Lobos and the Nevada Wolfpack. Now, I know a lot of people are probably thinking that this conference is Boise State's to lose. And personally, I don't see it that way. This might be a little hot takey, but I think with Dan Mullen now at UNLV, and I know that it's weird that UNLV got rid of their coach, despite their coach putting up great numbers. I mean, let's be honest, UNLV played great last year. They outplayed Cal. They beat Cal in the LA Bowl. That was a surprise to see, even without Fernando Mendoza and a couple of the other Cal guys playing in that game. That was very surprising for me to see. Just the coaching there was great. The special teams, the fake punt was amazing. So you love to see that. And I think that Mullen is going to bring a type of new standard, I think, which is hard to like. It feels almost wrong to say that, right? Because they did finish second in the Mountain West, but at the same time, it's so. Football is a game where it can be brutal. It can be unforgiving, and if you're good for a long time, but you're not great, eventually, eventually stuff starts to take take a toll. It takes a toll on who's going to follow you. It takes a toll on the amount of trust that the ADs have in you to get the job done, the players to get the job done, a lot of things. And they did get Alex Orji from Michigan, who's going to be the quarterback. Could play a big role in the quarterback. They lost De Jesus, which our Cal correspondent Cody talked about. He's now in California, so that's going to be very interesting to see how they play. But I don't think it's set in stone that Boise State is going to win this division, or sorry, this conference. And there's a couple reasons why, and a lot of it is going with their schedule. I mean, Boise State does play Notre Dame. Don't forget that. They go down to South Florida in week 1. They also play UNLV at Boise State, so that might be a little bit difficult. But they play Fresno State too, also at home. They play Utah State. Utah State's not bad either. So I think that Boise State's going to be good, but it's clearly a 2-man race right now between Boise State and UNLV. It's hard to suggest otherwise, just because the rest of the conference hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been good. Air Force has just been kind of the lackadaisical, I guess we'll call it, military academy in that regard. Whereas Hawaii is another team that's been struggling lately. Wyoming, but the top 5 or 6, they can be competitive. Fresno State can be competitive. Colorado State can be competitive. San Jose may have lost Nash. They may have lost a Triple Crown winner, but they can still be competitive. And Utah State will always have that money out there as well. I know they're competing with the BYUs and the Utahs of the world, but Utah State is not a slouch in their own right too, and they have brought a lot of good players through their program. The biggest surprise to me, honestly, is the biggest surprise to me is that there is not a surprise to me on this one. I know that sounds a little weird, but listen, Nevada has been really bad. I know that they're trying to improve that. They want more media there. It's actually an option that we could have had. Nevada wants people there. They want to turn the program around. They're just not there yet. New Mexico is starting to get that way. New Mexico's trying. They did lose players through the portal. There's issues with them. Air Force, I just discussed them. San Diego State has never really been much of a competitor, unfortunately. Maybe that changes, but for now, they have the market to change that, right? San Diego is huge. It's all about with teams in this conference and a lot of the G6 conferences. It's about getting butts in the stands. It's about getting money into the programs, and some of these schools have a seriously hard time doing that. Now, Boise State doesn't have a problem doing that. UNLV has had issues in the past doing that, and now they don't really have issues doing that. Obviously, they brought in the coaching standards that they want in Mullen, so they're going to bring in the right guys. Fresno State's a great area for that. Colorado State is a place where you would never expect players to want to play, and they're going there and they're going to be competitive. So there's a lot of West Coast teams here. Between the UNLVs, the Fresnos, the San Jose's, even San Diego, if we want to go there, Utah. There's teams that have the potential to win in this conference. This conference isn't as closed as it seems, and I think Boise State might be on their way down. I know a lot of people love the guy who's going to replace Ashton Genty. Don't get me wrong, great kid, but there's other stuff that goes into a football program, and you can't just slide pieces in. And that's why I do think that my pick for the winner of this conference, this is going to be a little hot takey, but I do have UNLV beating Boise State in this conference. I will have them at number 1. And for last place, I do have this one chalk. I do have it as Nevada Wolfpack being in last place in this conference. And that is more so because they just don't have the pieces right now to compete. I think Hawaii is a little bit too high. I would probably lower Hawaii a little bit, not just because of the roster issues that they've had, but because of their location as well. The traveling alone is just hellish. Now, before we get in, and I'm sorry once again, we're not going to be covering any action on this episode. I'll try to get it next week, but I don't want to talk about things that I'm not intelligent enough to talk about. I just don't think that's good journalism. I don't want to give anybody clickbait. That's not what the League Winners are about. That's not what I'm about. And that's not what I want the viewers to read. But I do want to talk about two other teams. We will do a little FCS conversation here. And we are going to talk about the UAlbany, the UAlbany Great Danes. Now, last year, they did not perform well. They were one of the worst teams in the CAA for the FCS. But the year before that, they actually finished in first place before the playoffs and everything in the CAA division within the FCS, in the CAA Conference, rather. Now, they're under the interim head coaching job of Jared Ambrose. Ambrose was the offensive coordinator of the team last year. Now, they've had some quarterback issues, but as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, they did name Jack Shields as their starting quarterback. Jack Shields, an interesting guy. He did play at the University of Buffalo. He comes in now, and he's manning an offensive unit that has some playmakers, to be honest. Griffin Woodell was the freshman offensive rookie of the year in 2023 before playing through a torn shoulder labrum in 2024 and ended up missing half the season. He's back. He's healthy. I've interviewed him. You guys can check out the interview on my Twitter at TommyCFB or on the League Winners website. There's a write-up on there. I think he's going to be a very important piece for UAlbany this season. And I think that he is going to really make sure that the team plays well and it plays at a high level, because that is what is most important, is that the CAA, they don't have bad. This is what I don't want people to get misconstrued on, is that the FCS is terrible because it's the FCS. But here's the thing. A lot of good and great players come from the FCS, go into the FBS, whether it's a G6, G5, G6, whatever you want to call it, or a P4 program. We saw Desmond Reed do it not last year. We saw him go from the FCS to Pitt, put up, stellar performance. Syracuse has defensive back who went from a community college to, now he plays at a P4 program. Kazir Brown, shout out to my man Kazir. He used to play at the University of Maine, and now he, went to the Florida Atlantic. He ended up latching on to the Green Bay Packers for their camp until recently getting cut. But that's another guy from going from the FCS to the NFL is no joke. And I don't think that people should really be sleeping on them the way that they're kind of being slept on. And just so you guys are aware, I actually do cover the UAlbany Great Danes too. So I'll have game previews and everything of that nature as well. But then we also cover the Monmouth, the Monmouth football team. And Monmouth is under coach Kevin Callahan, who's in his 33rd season, which is incredible. Monmouth has had back-to-back, offensive player of the years 3 times in a row for Monmouth. They have not yet won a championship yet, but it's kind of, they're a team that goes through streaks. Like they led all teams in the FCS with 490 yards per game on offense. And they ranked 3 nationally. I think it's a little over 7 yards per play, which is insane to think. That's insane to think about. I mean, whether it's FCS or FBS, that's just insane to think about. They beat Stony Brook. They have an All-American quarterback, Derek Robertson. Robertson was an offensive player of the year for the program. He's had close to 7,000 yards in the past 2 seasons. So Robertson is a guy that, you really want to keep an eye on. I mean, Josh Derry, wide receiver, TJ Spate, I think he had 6 touchdowns last year. Tron Neal, freshman All-American. Gavin Nelson, deep threat guy there. Tight end, Jack Neri. So there are people that are on the team that can do well. Rodney Nelson, is going to be playing for them. So there's a lot of potential there. So I did want to give a shout out to the Monmouth Hawks, and I did want to give a shout out to the UAlbany Great Danes before we closed out this show. Now, I'm sorry once again for any Maction fans. I just don't want to talk about something that we're not intelligently able to talk about. This has been a long show, running out almost 2.5 hours. And I appreciate everybody who's come on and watched. So before I get out of here, I just want to make sure you guys understand we will be covering multiple college football programs this year. We started a year ago with just 2, and now we're hitting 15 plus going into our second year in the program, in multiple programs. So I want to give a shout out to all the hardworking people over at the League Winners. Every Tuesday night, you guys are going to have a live show that's going to incorporate myself here and multiple college football beat writers. It won't just be the League Winners, but it'll be primarily our guys, and a lot of friends of the show and of the company are going to be on here talking football. And we're only going to be bringing reporters who have been live on site or experts in their field. There will not be any, you're not going to hear any uneducated takes here. That's just not what we do. Now, going forward, like I said, every Tuesday night, going to be a live show from 8 p.m. Eastern time to 10 p.m. Eastern time. We may miss Brandyn Pokrass on a couple of those because of some schedule conflicts with games. That might happen for a few guys, with some of the G5/G6 schools. And then every Wednesday morning, we'll have the audio version up on podcast on Spotify. Just look for the League Winners and you'll find it on there. This will be on Facebook, YouTube, and it will also be on X, also known as Twitter. Now, this is Thomas Christopher. I am the owner of the League Winners. Appreciate everybody coming on and enjoying and listening to me banter and have fun with some of my friends and colleagues. So until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. You can follow me at Tommy CFB, nice and simple on Twitter. You can follow the League Winners at League Winners CF for college football. And you can follow us on Instagram at the League Winners, just how it's spelled. Follow us on the website too at theleaguewinners.com. Now, until you guys see me next time, I hope you have a great night. I appreciate everybody coming in, and let's just have a great year of some college football. I'll see you later.